when the AWA came into Thunder Bay in July 71, they had their tune of regulars. As I said, Red Bastine and Doc Rex, and one of the nicest people they had there was an individual by the name of Hercules Cortez, and he was a big, strong, young guy, and I got to know him after a couple of trips that he was there when I was selling pictures in the gardens. And that July thing, they came and we had a good little chat and joked around and everything, and then they left and went to Winnipeg. The next day after that, from Winnipeg, they were on their way to Minneapolis, as the story goes, and had a car accident, and Hercules was killed. Driving with him was Red Bastine, and Red, the only reason that Red was alive was because he had fallen asleep, and when Hercules lost control of the car, Red went underneath the front seat, and that saved him. 2 days later, I read in the newspaper about the accident, and it just kind of hit home, and I thought, geez, I just had a beer with the guy.
Hey, the wrestling grandpa calls back up. A couple of weeks ago, I know this gentleman called, and he's obviously from an older generation, and he kind of just talked about being in the locker room and selling magazines and pictures for some of the older wrestlers in the 60s and 70s. And I was like, you got to call more. We just want to hear from your perspective. And then he calls in a call where he has a beer with a man, and then he dies the next day in a road trip. Good Lord, wrestling grandpa. What are you doing to us? Unbelievable. Definitely traumatizing, but definitely sums up like, fuck, wrestling is wild. These guys just go out there, and you're right. It was a different time. They were doing 400, 500, 600-mile treks every single night. You hear some of those dusty stories. They were drinking in the car constantly. It was a party from city to city to get yourself from one side of the town to the other. And not my favorite story in where Red Bastine is still alive because he didn't wear his seatbelt and ended up underneath the car, and somehow that saved his life. But must have been the worst car trip for those guys, and probably scary for all the wrestlers now doing and continuing that loop, knowing that just happened, and that can happen to anybody. Fall asleep at the wheel, you're doing all these long drives, and that's going to go down. And caller, anonymous caller, with all of these stories, one of many, being a young kid in the olden days, I appreciate it. Sorry you went through this, but I appreciate you calling in the story. Hey, thanks for watching. That call was part of a whole podcast called Wrestling Anonymous. Listen to the whole thing weekly. Wherever you listen to your podcast, go subscribe. While you're at it, subscribe right here on YouTube to Colt Cabana's channel. Thank you.